A jury has now found social media commentator and blogger Milagro Cooper guilty of defaming rapper Megan Thee Stallion.
There has been another win in court for celebrities versus bloggers in defamation conversations. So,
welcome back to Advocacy, Alchemy with Professor Ross. Today we have a good one, guys. Now today, this isn't just a bunch of celebrity drama. This is actually what happens when you spill the tea online and it crosses the line into defamation with deepfakes and a jury verdict. Now on one side we have Megan Thee Stallion. Now she's a platinum selling artist. She has Grammy Awards and she also experienced some very public trauma after she was shot and dragged online by various sources. Now on the other side we have a blogger, a commentator, who built a brand online and decided that Megan was, now these are her words, liar, a drunk, mentally slow, and basically running a conspiracy against another platinum artist who's a convicted shooter. And she didn't just think these things, she actually posted them online. She streamed them and she even pointed her followers toward those deepfake sex videos. Today we're going to break down what Megan actually sued for, how this turned from a messy internet beef into some civil liability, how the jury walked through the evidence, and how our intuition fits in versus the actual legal standards. By the end, I think you'll be able to look at any online exposure video and ask, is this just talk? Or is this lawsuit material? All right, with that, let's jump in. I think it's important before we dive into the facts and the law that we pause for just a second and we talk about one important thing. How did this case end up in federal court instead of a state court like Florida State Court? That's an important question because if you figure this out, then you really are a long ways in understanding federal practice and state practice, okay? So there's three ways to get into federal court, all right? Three major ways, all right? First, federal question jurisdiction. That simply means that there's a federal law that's in question that we're fighting about, or maybe some constitutional law that we're fighting about. So think civil rights, federal employment cases, and maybe First Amendment challenges and things like that. The second way is diversity jurisdiction. That means that both of the parties are from different states. They're not from the same state. All right. Also, you have when there's an amount in controversy that's over 75,000. All right. So if it's over 75,000 that people are fighting over and they're from different places, then you could get into federal court. All right. Next is another nuance that's in the law. This is removal jurisdiction. And that simply means that sometimes if a case starts in state court, there may be the option to remove it to federal court, okay? And then the federal court can assume jurisdiction and it stays in federal court from there. All right, so this case is in the Southern District of Florida. It's a federal case. They're going to be looking at the state laws used in Florida. Now, Megan Pete is from Houston, Texas. Now, who's from Florida? Obviously, it has to be this blogger, Miss Graham, okay? All right, so if you bring the case in the same jurisdiction where the defendant can be found, all right? So there's a lot of things going on here. I want to make sure that you understand, though, why this case is in federal court. All right, so with that, let's jump into some of the other facts. All right, today it's very important that we set the scene of what's happening here. All right, so back in 2020, the artist Megan Thee Stallion, she was shot in both feet after a party in Los Angeles. Now you might be wondering, now who's the shooter? All right, now a jury later convicts another artist, Tory Lanez, of multiple felonies tied to that same incident. Now this is not just an internet rumor. This is actually a criminal verdict, and Mr. Tory Lanez, whose real name is Daystar Peterson, is in prison now, serving 10 years. Now, in 2022, during the criminal trial, Megan Thee Stallion testified. Now, she talked about the shooting, the backlash, and even wanting to pass away rather than live through the public humiliation. Now, that's all in the record. That's a part of her testimony, all that stuff. Now, while all that was happening, it seemed that the internet was having court, rightly as does happen in real life. So the internet was also having court in session too. Now there's a blogger who's a defendant in this lawsuit. Her name is Milagro Cooper. That's her real name, but she goes by Milagro Grams as a internet pseudonym. Now she's streaming on Twitter, Instagram, all these other different places, okay? Saying all these sorts of things, calling Megan a liar, saying that her story is false, suggesting that she's trying to deceive the courts, being seen asking out loud if the artist Megan Thee Stallion ever been deemed slow. Also calling her various names about alcoholism and things of that nature. Okay, now you might be wondering now, why would she be in trouble just for some of these things? They seem like the things that everyone always says. Now let's take it one step further. What made everything worse is there was a video, a fake AI generated sex video, and it had the likeness of this platinum selling artist. And she has streams and other evidence that showed that she pointed her followers back toward that video, saying that it was in her likes, saved in her likes where they can go find it. So you got streams, posts, tweets, comments, and the deepfake all flowing in one direction, all trying to paint Megan Thee Stallion in a certain bad light. Now, meanwhile, you have Megan in real life saying, 1, she was shot. 2, a jury convicted the person who shot her. And 3, now she's being harassed and humiliated every day online. You see the problem? It's fairly obvious, right? All right, so this is where we have the lawsuit. Let's talk about what are actually the actions that they brought against this other young woman, Miss Cooper. And I have all these files available so you can take a look at them. They're all in the comments, pinned at the top comment. All right, but next, let's go into the law breakdown. All right, first, let's start with defamation per se. The basic rule under Florida law is that you have a false statement of fact that's published to a third party about the plaintiff that harms their reputation. And also you have to have the required level of fault. So for a public figure, that's going to require some actual malice. Now, defamation per se, it means that the statement is so bad that the harm is automatically presumed. You don't have to guess if it hurts someone's reputation. The law assumes this is going to hurt someone's reputation. Let's talk about some classic categories. Accusing someone of a serious crime. All right. Saying someone's unfit to do their job. Suggesting someone's mentally incompetent. Attacking a person in a way that obviously wrecks their standing in their community. All right. Now let's take that and let's look and see what exactly did the blogger do here. All right. Miss Cooper, or Milagro Grams, what she did is she allegedly said that she called Megan a liar about being shot and about the testimony that she gave during the trial. She suggested that Megan Thee Stallion deceived the court. She called her some names, suggested that she might have some sort of substance abuse problem. So what she's doing is basically setting up that Megan Thee Stallion is lying under oath, basically shouting that she's committing perjury, questioning her mental capacity and the professionalism. All that's going to hit directly at this woman's career and her credibility. So when you make these types of statements, you understand why it becomes per se defamation. They're so bad that if I understand you're making these type of statements, hey, I don't have to wait and see how bad it's going to be because I know it's going to be bad. All right. Actual malice. Now, this is going to be required for a public figure, especially someone like a Megan Thee Stallion or a politician. You need some actual malice. All right. So because Megan is a public figure, all right, she has to show actual malice that either the blogger knew the statements were false. That's part one. Or seriously didn't care whether they were true or not. That means she had a reckless disregard to the truth. All right, now here, the blogger allegedly sat through the criminal trial. She heard the evidence. She saw the guilty verdict. Then she still ran with narrative that Megan Thee Stallion made all of her statements up. I'm talking about the trial of Tory Lanez or Daystar Peterson, okay? Now, that's exactly the sort of pattern the plaintiff's lawyer in the defamation case loves for showing a jury. You knew better. You watched the evidence. You just didn't care. All right, let's move on to our second count. You have the deepfake porn. Now, this falls under the Florida's Altered Sexual Depiction Statute. And that statute targets anytime you have altered depictions of a sexual nature. And that's basically deepfake porn and revenge porn, things of that nature. It looks real, or it's using a real image of people and being altered in such a way that it makes it look like they're doing things they're not doing, okay? What's the elements here for this deep fake? First, all right, there has to be an altered sexual image or a video of a real identifiable person, all right? Second, you need a defendant that knowingly promotes the fake or the altered sexual image or video. And number three, and this is all done without the original person's consent and in a willful and malicious way. It simply means a harmful way. Now, in this case, we have a blogger. Now, she didn't create the deep fake, but what she did allegedly do is this. She liked a tweet that contained the AI-generated sex video of someone that looked like Megan Thee Stallion. Now, that like made it visible on her public likes tab. Then she made another post stating, "Go to my likes," and that's essentially giving directions to the deepfake. Now, she later acknowledged that the video was probably AI, but she boasted about drawing attention to the fake. So you see what we have here, someone who knowingly promotes the fake video that potentially could make someone look bad. She wasn't passive in this. This was active promotion, all right? So under the Florida statute, it doesn't let you wash your hands and say, well, I didn't make it. As long as you're actively driving traffic to it, using a real person's likeness to humiliate that person, then you're coming into the danger zone for this law. So the jury was asked a simple question. Did she willfully and maliciously promote an altered sexual depiction of Megan Thee Stallion or Megan Pete without her consent? The jury answered yes. All right, let's move on to our third count. Notice we're calling these counts versus charges because this is actually a civil case, meaning no one's going to jail over this, but someone is going to be out some money behind this. All right, so our third civil count is intentional infliction of emotional distress. This is a tort that simply means you went way too far. To win this tort, Megan has to show, first, the blogger's conduct was extreme and outrageous, going beyond all bounds of decency. Second, the conduct was intentional or reckless. And third, it caused her severe emotional distress. Now, what pushes this over the edge, guys? Okay, it's not just a one-off insult. It's not, I don't like your music. But it has to be something you can show that's a sustained, potentially a multi-year campaign where a person has been accusing someone of lying about being shot and tying it to a convicted shooter she already had a restraining order against, promoting a deepfake video that's basically pornography, guys. And she's doing all this after hearing this same woman testify in a criminal court case about being depressed and having suicidal ideations, okay? All right, this is the kind of fact pattern where a jury looks around and they look at each other and they say, yes, this is way beyond messy. This is simply cruel. Why would you do that? Here, when the jury was asked this question, they agreed Mrs. Cooper's behavior was extreme and outrageous, and it caused severe emotional distress. All right, let's move on to the fourth count. All right, this is cyberstalking and a request for an injunction. Now, separate from money, Megan Thee Stallion also asked the court for an injunction. And that's basically a request for the court to do something. Use your power, court, to stop them from doing something else. Here is a court order to make the harassment stop. Now, under Florida's cyberstalking law, the court can order someone to stop repeated online communications, especially if they serve no legitimate purpose and if they cause substantial emotional distress. Now, the petition of the plaintiff, it frames the blogger's conduct as a pattern, a course of conduct. You have some repeated posts, you have streams, and you have the deepfake promotion. It's not just one bad tweet. Now, courts are very nervous about prior restraints being placed on our First Amendment rights to free speech. All right, you can't just gag someone because they're annoying. So this is where your viewers get to see the tension between free speech and the right not to be stalked, threatened, or humiliated through deepfake, embarrassing material. That's why I believe this case is going to be studied as we move into the future. It's sitting right in this place that has some constitutional tension, especially with our world now, with the social media being so fast to deliver so much information about everything. Okay, quickly, before we move into our next section, let's talk about this quick little small thing here in this case. Now, there's a special type of defendant called a media defendant in this case. Now, Florida treats media defendants differently when it comes to defamation and damages. It's going to require you have some pre-lawsuit notice requirements, and they have some questions that they were able to ask the jury because of this special type of media defendant. First, they were able to ask, does this defendant regularly disseminate news or information to the public? And they answered yes. And is she operating an online equivalent of traditional news media? Yes. Should she be treated as a media defendant? Yes. All right. Now, that doesn't save her on any liability. The jury still found defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and deepfake sexual content promotion. Now, it did and is going to matter on the money side, okay? Now, the judge ultimately is going to trim the money down some. The ultimate amount is only $75,000, guys. She asked for millions, or was in hopes of getting millions, but only $75,000. That's not a very big verdict. All right, we do have all of it below so you can take a look at it. But next, let's talk about the evidentiary standard. All right, let's talk about our 6 levels of evidence that we go through every day. All right, these are important. These were important here in this case, but they're also important in any case where you're going to have to go to court, any case where you have any police involvement, all those. So we'll start at the weakest and work our way up to the highest. First, you have mere suspicion. Now, at this level of mere suspicion, the police or the government, all they have is a hunch that something's off. They don't have any proof that they can point to show anyone that anything is actually off. Now, I will say that if the reasonable suspicion, now at this level, this is where the government or the police can point to specific articulable facts that would make a reasonable person suspect that something's wrong, or maybe there's some criminal activity afoot. Now, at this level, the police and the government, they can stop and ask you questions. Now, it's not enough here for them to arrest anyone just yet, but during this investigation, there may be more evidence that turns up. Here, in this situation, you have, once again, a blogger. You see some conflicting early media reports, some confusing with the timelines, old statements that don't perfectly line up. You might say, okay, I reasonably suspect something's off, dig a little deeper. It's all part of sort of the investigation. Perfect small bit of teaching advice. If you're in the media world and you're in that situation or you're at this level, correct response is always to ask questions, verify, and do some more research. Never throw around words like someone's a liar, they perjured themselves, like you've already seen the verdict. All right, moving up one more level, we have probable cause. Now, at this level, someone is going to be arrested. All right, this is when the government has enough facts that would convince a reasonable person to believe that a crime has been committed and that the person being arrested is involved. At this level, arrests become legal. Additionally, police at this level will be able to go and obtain search warrants and be able to seize property. Now, in this case, this is not a criminal case, so this is a civil case, guys. So no one was arrested. Now, what did happen was investigations were performed before the lawsuit was filed and directly after the lawsuit was filed. That's all done through depositions and interrogatories. Interrogatory simply means questions to the other side. A deposition means when you actually set a time and the other side comes to a location that's agreed upon and you ask questions of each other face to face. All right. Let's talk about the next level, which is actually the level that this case is at, preponderance of the evidence. Now, at this level, this means that it's more likely than not that the claim is true. All that's required to win is 51% of the evidence to be in one side's favor. Also, you can lose by having 51% out of your favor. So, this is the standard for most lawsuits, okay? So in this lawsuit, the jury basically was just asked, is it more likely than not that the blogger made false statements of fact about Megan that harmed her? They looked at the criminal conviction of Tory Lanez, the blogger's own words, the timing and context, Megan's testimony about the harm, and they decided that it crossed that line of 51%. So they came up with the verdict against Miss Cooper and in favor of Miss Pete. All right, clear and convincing evidence. All right, this case didn't require that, but this is a level of proof required in some cases when you need more receipts to prove your point. So when you're talking about fraud cases or certain cases that go in front of various government agencies, you might need this level of proof. All right, this level of proof means that it's highly probable or substantially likely that the claim is true. It's going to require about 75% of the evidence to be in your favor to win this type of action. All right. Now, when this level of proof might be required in a civil action is when you're talking about punitive damages. Okay. And that just means punishment damages. Sometimes in a civil suit, a judge can allow arguments for punitive damages, saying that the person should be not only responsible for paying back exactly what a person lost, but also to be able to pay back a portion that's considered a punishment, so a person won't do it again. All right. So also, like I said, you'll have this in fraud cases, and you also see it in child custody cases, things like that. All right. Let's move on to our highest level, beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, at this level, this is required for every criminal case in the United States. This is the highest standard. This beyond a reasonable doubt simply means that there's no other logical conclusion that a person can come to besides the defendant being guilty of the charges that are brought against them. At this level, this is also where criminal conviction becomes legal. This is the standard that sent Tory Lanez to prison. What was required at this level is anywhere between 90 and 95% of the evidence being in favor of the government. So, what this means is that a criminal jury finds beyond a reasonable doubt that Megan Thee Stallion was shot and told the truth about it. Meanwhile, people online, without that level of evidence, loudly called her a liar and accused her of perjuring herself. So that's where the problem lies here, okay, guys? This is also where your gut has to watch itself. Can't speak before you think about it sometimes. Your gut might say, I don't like someone, but the law says, hey, what can you actually prove? You can feel however you want, but you can't publish accusations of serious crimes or deep fakes about real people without evidence and then act shocked when the civil law system catches up with you. Okay, guys, so I hope you learned something today. All right, so if nothing else, I hope you learned from Megan Thee Stallion versus the blogger that first, gossip, it can become a real tort. And the line between what we call nowadays tea and defamation per se is not as far as people might think. All right. Second, deep fakes are not a game. All right. You don't get to say, hey, I didn't make this video, I didn't make this image. I just showed it to everybody I know. Okay, no, you can't do that. All right, the law sees this as promotion, and promotion can still equate to liability. All right, third, internet clout. Well, I don't think it's going to be having a court record. A criminal jury making a finding beyond a reasonable doubt is going to beat someone's threads and posts on X. All right, finally, don't pass up on your intuition. If your gut's telling you, hey, slow down, then do that. Don't speed up. If your gut's telling you that something seems off and this isn't a smart move, maybe it's time to stop and ask some questions, look for some more evidence, and definitely slow down. Don't publicly accuse people of felonies unless you're ready to stand on it under oath. All right, in the end, I want you guys to think like a juror, not like a comment section, okay? Every time you see someone getting dragged online, remember to ask yourself, what's the evidence? What standard would this meet? Is this just mere suspicion, or would this actually survive in court? Tell me your thoughts and comments below. Do you think this jury got it right? And where exactly do you think the line should be between harsh commentary and defamation? Remember, this is Advocacy Alchemy, and I am Professor Ross. I'll see you tomorrow. Everyone have a great day. Stay safe out there.
Please subscribe to Advocacy Alchemy for more lectures from Professor Ross.